Fanfic Corner, presented by Jennifer. Flying. Omega sat in the cockpit, reading the ship's manual, as the rest of the batch were on a mission much too dangerous for her. Tech had promised that he would let her actually fly when she was ready. His version of ready was memorizing the whole entire manual. Omega complained about how she would never be able to know it like he did. That would take a long time, and she didn't have that kind of patience. Hunter and Wrecker thought that he was being a little too harsh, but Echo backed him up, saying it was better to be safe than sorry. The young clone blinked slowly as her eyes scanned the pages one by one. Nothing about the instructions were interesting, not even the pictures. She knew the basics, but she was more of a hands-on learner. Maybe she could convince Tech that with that logic of how most kids learn best visually. She sighed, continuing her boring assignment. All was quiet on the Marauder. Omega felt the book slip from her hands as tiredness took over her. She was about to doze off when the doors to the cockpit whooshed open. She immediately jumped up, reaching for her bow, but stopped upon seeing who it was. Tech! She rushed towards her brother, her brow furrowed in concern when she saw that his armor had a blaster shot through, barely missing his heart, along with him holding his left arm that hung limply at his side. Omega looked at him in horror. Blood began to drizzle down his armor. "I'm fine, Omega," Tech said when he caught sight of her worried face. "No, you're not. You need to rest." Omega tried to lead him to an empty chair in the back of the cockpit, but he refused. "The others, they need a pickup." He didn't expect his breathing to come out in gasps. Perhaps his injuries were more severe than he took into account. But that didn't matter at the moment. "You're not in the right condition to fly." Omega gestured to his arm that wasn't of any use to him. She could hear how much his voice strained when he spoke. "They won't last much longer if the Marauder doesn't come." He carried himself to the pilot's seat, despite the dizziness and heaviness of his body. Omega shook her head. If he flew, he wouldn't make it to where they needed to be. That's when the thought struck her. "Tech, I can fly," she said confidently, hoping that he wouldn't shoot down her solution. Tech stared at her. Have you memorized the handbook as I have instructed? He watched as her hands began to play with the loose string on her dress. Well, not exactly, but then it is out of the question. You need to be prepared for anything, and that requires... Tech stopped talking as a burning pain ran through his chest, causing him to sink to the ground. He could faintly hear Omega asking him a question. Her voice panicked. Suddenly, his comm was beeping too. All the noise made his head hurt worse. His brothers needed him, but he could barely focus as it was. Tech! Omega helped him up, sitting him down in the co-pilot's chair. I can fly the ship. You obviously aren't in the right shape. Besides, you're right here next to me. You can tell me what to do. Tech had to admit that it wasn't a bad point. Sighing, he agreed, giving her a confirming nod. Omega quickly sat down in the pilot's seat. A wave of nervousness and excitement buzzed through her as she started the ship. Once in the air, it wasn't too hard to keep the Marauder steady. Every once in a while, she would have to swerve it back on course. From here, make a right. After that, angle the nose down and enter that circle area. The base is in the ground. Hunter and the others should be waiting on the platform near the top, Tech instructed. Got it. Omega looked out the window, scanning the area for said base. It wasn't too far. She carefully began to fly lower. But what she wasn't prepared for was the two patrols that noticed the Marauder and were now on her tail. Tech, we got company. That's not good. Tech glanced at the two ships. He could see that they were preparing to fire. He reached over and activating the shields, but they wouldn't hold up for long. Should I try and lose them? Omega asked, steering out of the way of the incoming blast. The best thing you can do is try not to get shot and retrieve the others as soon as possible, Tech said calmly. Speed up more and descend. The ship shook as a blaster hit the rear shields. Omega tried to stay focused, but she was afraid of what would happen if they got shot down. Her fears only grew as more ships joined the fighting in taking down the modified Omicron-class attack shuttle. Omega quickly formulated a plan in her head. Since the base was in the ground, she could steer the ship all the way down, blowing up whatever was down there. The ships would follow her, thinking she would be at a dead end, and become caught in the explosion. It would be up to her to make a sharp turn as soon as she fired and fly upwards next to the walls. Her brothers were at the top, so while all the commotion would be at the bottom, she could make a hasty pickup. I think I have an idea. She could feel Tech's eyes on her. You might want to hold on. She gave him a nervous smile before carrying out her plan. Omega pulled the Marauder into a nosedive as they plummeted towards the bottom of the base. Pull up! Pull up! Tech shouted, closing his eyes and hanging onto the side of his seat for dear life. Omega, what in the galaxy are you doing? Are you intentionally trying to get us killed? Omega shot him a small glare. I know what I'm doing, she yelled back, trying to concentrate. Hunter watched as the Marauder flew right over them and dove straight down as 4 other ships chased them closely from behind. What does Tech think he's doing? Echo asked, peering over the edge to see where his crazy brother was flying their ride to. I hope the kid isn't freaking out too much, Wrecker commented as the 4 ships crashed at the bottom of the base, sending out a large explosion. His heart dropped. The Marauder didn't emerge yet. He looked over at Hunter and Echo, who had ripped off their helmets, mouths open, but not saying a word. Wrecker squinted through the smoke that was starting to rise, waving a hand past his face to clear it away. That's when he heard the faint hum of the familiar ship. He let out a breath that he didn't even know was holding, in as the Marauder came into view. Hunter placed a hand over his heart and gave a sigh of relief. Not a day went by that his brothers didn't give him a near heart attack. The side doors to the Havoc opened, and the three quickly jumped aboard. Echo furiously walked into the cockpit. That stunt had to have been the worst one yet, and that was saying something compared to all the dangerous moves that the technician had made while flying. Tech, what was that? You could have gotten both yourself and Omega. Omega? Echo didn't expect to see the kid sitting tensely in the pilot's seat. That's when he noticed that the person he accused of piloting the ship was actually in the seat over, covered in dry blood and bruises. What's going on? Tech, what happened to you? Hunter interjected, rushing to Tech's side. Good to see you all, too, he scoffed. When I was coming back, I ran into some scouts. Nothing's too broken except my arm and a minor blaster shot to my shoulder. Yeah, nothing too broken. Have you seen yourself? Wrecker mimicked giving his brother a disapproving look, heading out to set up the medical supplies. Let's check over these injuries. Surprised you lasted this long without passing out. Echo extended a hand and helped him hobble to the back. Omega watched as Echo and Tech left the cockpit. She had remained silent during the whole interaction until Hunter lightly tapped her on the shoulder, signaling her to get up. She quickly complied and made a break for her room. Not so fast, Omega, Hunter said, catching her by the arm. He motioned for her to sit in the co-pilot seat. That flying was very, very interesting. Tech was injured, and I thought I could just take over for a bit, and then the Imperials started to chase us, and that was the first thing that came to my mind. Omega. And I know it was stupid, but everything turned out okay in the end. I swear I was doing a lot better until the other ships. Omega, I'm not punishing you. Omega stopped talking, tilting her head to the side. You're not? Hunter shook his head. While it was reckless, it did work. I wouldn't encourage that type of flying under any other circumstances, though. Until Tech is fully recovered, don't expect to be flying anytime soon. Omega sighed.